The 1996 Telecommunications Act was the first domino to fall. It was the catalyst. It was the fuse being lit that caused the massive explosion. Without this piece of legislation, none of the effects that we currently see today would have been possible. I know it is shocking. It is not very believable. And it is disenchanting to understand that legislation as far back as 1996 that was not very widely publicized at the time, nor is it widely talked about in the history books. Of course, they control, they meaning the 1%, they control the mainstream history books, not just the books in the schools that indoctrinate the children, but also the distribution of publishing companies and documentaries like National Geographic, History Channel, and Smithsonian, as I stated in my video about George Washington / History is a Lie. As a result, this act is not widely discussed or publicized. Yet the impact it has on the distribution of entertainment is very prevalent in every individual's life who consumes media. The first thing is the way they present the content and distribute it. How is it presented? Well, what I've noticed is, since there are only 6 companies, in my next video I'll get into the specifics of the 6 companies, the advertisers, and some of the propaganda. Like I said, this will take quite a few videos for me to fully articulate the ramifications, to not make it sound so convoluted. The 6 companies are as follows: Disney, AT&T, National Amusements, News Corp, Comcast, and Sony. Those are the 6 companies that control the majority of television shows, network TV. Disney even controls Hulu. And since they bought the entertainment branch of 21st Century Fox, they now control The Simpsons, King of the Hill, the entertainment area, not the news area like Fox News or Fox Sports, that is now currently controlled by News Corp. But we will get into that in a bit. But since you have 6 companies that control all of the entertainment, there is not competition for the viewer in terms of mainstream entertainment. And as a result, these companies do not have to compete with one another by producing new, engaging content that will make the consumer choose one network over the other. That's why I've noticed that there are some networks that show an entire block, an entire afternoon of Seinfeld reruns, an entire night of Law and Order reruns. Whatever you think about those shows, it is regardless. It is irrelevant to my point. It does not take talent. It does not take any revolutionary thinking. It does not take any effort whatsoever to simply replay reruns from a 1990s television show. That is laziness personified. But you see, if all of them do that, that is all you have to watch. What is your alternative? And it is very ironic to me that a piece of legislation that was created to increase competition has caused less competition, because these smaller networks cannot compete against these media moguls. So not only does the content have lower quality, but it is also repetitive. I remember when they used to fight for time slots. 8 o'clock was prime time. These network shows were fighting for those slots. That way they could get the advertisers who would have the most eyeballs on their products and services. As a result, they could get more revenue entering the war chest for the networks. And that increased revenue would also increase the value. And in a capitalistic system where you're paid on what you produce, they would have gotten paid a larger amount of money. The actors, the writers, the people who do the makeup, and so on and so forth. Because they would have gotten paid a higher amount from those advertisers for those primetime slots. And when those networks were competing for those primetime slots, it was in their interest to create new content that was different than their competitors, that was revolutionary in terms of ideas, and that was unique, sort of a novelty. Nowadays, it is very similar to what these networks tend to show. Another result is that if you look at older television shows, even the ones that were widely popular, most of them only lasted about 5 seasons. That's because these networks wanted to make new shows to compete against their competitors. See, if they would continue to show the same shows with the same characters, the same environment, and the same situations, the consumer, which is me and you, would get bored with the show and they would choose an alternative. Now you see shows like The Simpsons, Family Guy, Law and Order, and they go on for sometimes 15 seasons, over 15 years, which was unheard of years ago when they were creating new content. So not only do they show an entire night of Seinfeld reruns, but they also show the same concept for over 15 years. As a result, people are going to places that have the content they want, which is why you see Netflix, Hulu, and YouTube taking off like a rocket ship. That's because individuals can look for new content. Think about this. On YouTube, you're competing for views. So if you want to get viewers, and if you have advertisements on your video, if it is monetized, or if you just want to create a community on YouTube, you have to create quality content. If individuals do not like your content, they have millions of other channels and content creators to choose from. Similar to the way television networks used to be, when there were many of them competing for your eyeballs. YouTube users must create revolutionary and new quality content to get the viewer to watch. And if they don't, they die. they cease to exist. Or they can keep making content, but nobody will watch their content. Kind of the last point I would make in terms of entertainment is that even in the film industries, when there's not a lot of competition, but this also is prevalent in network TV shows, no one wants to take a risk. No one wants to create original, thought-provoking content that is a novelty, because that is a risk. When you create new content like Stranger Things, that is different than any other show that ever existed, you have a risk that people will not watch it, and that you might offend a social justice warrior who's going to cry. That's why you see tons of Marvel, Star Wars, and shitty Disney remakes taking place. Because they know that because people keep up with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and because the young children will go see those Disney movies, and the older people that enjoyed those films growing up will have the nostalgic factor, that is a layup. They know for a fact they can rack in billions of dollars by playing it safe. It's the same way in terms of network television. So they're not taking risk anymore because there's no competition and the quality of the content is plummeting. Now, in terms of the media, the news media, tonight I was not even doing this on purpose. I was trying to check the wild card standings for baseball to see what was going on in the pennant race. As I was looking, I saw that there was Jimmy Kimmel on ABC. On CBS, you had Stephen Colbert. On TBS, you had Samantha Bee. And on NBC, you had Jimmy Fallon. I noticed that all of them were making fun of Trump. And regardless of your opinion of Trump, I'm not here to talk about that. The point I'm making, though, is that all of these networks agreed on the same thing. Supposedly, they're separate entities. Supposedly, these hosts that read off teleprompters and read off other people's jokes are independent thinkers. Yet, they all come to the same conclusions. They all make similar jokes. And they all try to push a similar narrative. An individual at home will see that, and then that is what they will talk about, think about, and it creates their worldview in some cases. They get their news from these corporations. They will see what is on there, and then they will discuss that. They will think in certain terms of what they observe. And subconsciously in their brain, it ingrains certain ideas. Now, I prefer the alternative media. I don't think any of the media corporations do a good job of educating the public. Part of it is because of the format. In a 2-minute segment, when you have to put commercials in place, you can't really discuss substantive issues because it takes longer than 2 minutes to describe legislation. It takes longer than 2 minutes to describe the intricacies of the wars going on, geopolitical strategism, and so on and so forth. So not only are you not allowed because of the structure, but the 1% that distribute the content want us dumbed down. And they want us arguing over stupid bullshit that does not do anything to enrich our lives. Right now, everyone is arguing about Baltimore. I mean, I don't live in Baltimore. I've never been to Baltimore. I don't plan on going to Baltimore. I don't understand how it is prevalent to my life, how I should worry about it. I mean, I hope the people there live well as every other city in the United States. But you have one side of the aisle, they're trying to say that Baltimore is not bad, And then the other side is trying to point out that it is rat infested. I mean, really, why would you waste your time arguing over that? Why would you put yourself down to that level? That is because the media has chosen to focus and put a microscope on Baltimore. That, as a result, causes people at your job, whether you work in a factory, finance, at a church or a school, to discuss it. Your neighbors that live in communities isolated from New York and California, where most of these media corporations are located, discuss it. Family members, and so on and so forth. But it is people's worldview. They distribute the content. It is in that person's mind. And then that is the topic of discussion for the day. Like I said, I prefer the alternative media, but the alternative media pretty much just tries to debunk the stories coming from the mainstream media about why it's wrong. And as a result, the mainstream media still controls the narrative. If I had an entire group call you a racist without evidence, and then you were trying to spend your entire hour debunking that, I would still control the narrative. I would still control the topic of the day. I would still control the news cycle. As a result, my power would be very vast. And so the content they distribute is lazy. They don't take risk. Shows go on forever. They show shitty reruns of the same stuff. Disney remakes. Superhero bullshit. Transformers, Star Wars. People go online. And the media creates these stupid narratives. And then the alternative media spends the entire show or long portions of it trying to debunk those narratives. So as a result, the mainstream media might not create someone's worldview. They might not mold someone's worldview, but they set the narrative, the topics of the day that are talked about in classrooms, at workplaces, in churches, at the dinner table, and so on and so forth. In the next video, we will get into the big six corporations, the content they own, and the propaganda that is being spewed by the big six.